Okay, perfect. So, thank you so much for being willing to work with me and doing this remotely. I'm, I guess, Tulsa's resident 90-year-old. We drove from Dallas last night, super rainy, and so this morning I was a little extra hesitant. So, thank you so much, everyone, for setting this up so I could still do this talk remotely. I wanted to talk to you all today about doing how to manage UX from an agency perspective and what that means growth-wise, what that means for managing workflow, and what that means with working with integrated departments. So let me go ahead and share my screen with all of you. All right, perfect. So a little bit about myself. My name is Karina Buvaylik. I am Russian. We moved here to the States in 1996. I have been working as a UX designer and analyst for about 3 years now at Cosby Harrison Marketing in Tulsa. I graduated in 2015, and I'm currently living in Tulsa with my dog, like 80 houseplants, a boyfriend, etc. I love to travel. I love to go to coffee shops, meet people, etc. But one thing that I also really, really love doing is having the opportunity to talk to other people that do what I do. I'm sure a lot of you have been in a situation where you're at a family event or talking with friends, and they're like, "What do you do?" And you're like, "Hey, I do UX," and blank stares. That's it. So it's so glad to be here. All right. So what I really wanted to talk over with you is kind of an overview of some of the few challenges that a small team faces. Right now, it's actually a team of one. That's myself. And how any interns or any other team members that I have coming and working with me, how we're able to manage those challenges, specifically when you're having to work on multiple different client websites, multiple different projects at the same time. Another big one that's a really big challenge working in the agency world specifically is user testing. You're doing work on a crunch timeline, often with very little budget, and trying to find a way to justify that spend. It's important. And then handoffs. One thing that we did not used to do, surprisingly, before I moved into the department is we used to create a deliverable, whip something off and Omnigraphal, stick it in Basecamp. Then it went to design, then it went to dev, and then there was always this question of why does nothing look like the wireframes or the expected deliverables, and how to manage going through and not having those kind of walled garden issues that a lot of agencies do tend to suffer from. And then beyond UX, what are some other things that you can do to both grow your skill set, as grow your team, and work within your agency and with your stakeholders? So, all right. The big one I wanted to start off with is managing the work. When you're working at this could be either agency, this could be at a place with a younger user experience department, etc. One thing is that there's rarely enough team members to manage all of the work, especially when you're working on multiple different projects at one time. And so this is some of the practical work that's helped me over the last few years that I continue to iterate and work through. And the first one is working with the clients. There tends to be sometimes a little bit of a hubris within our industry of we know what's best for the user, we know what's best for the product, etc. But you really can't do that effectively without working with that client. They've been in business often, for decades. Clearly, there's value and knowledge there, even if they don't understand what the user experience portion of it is. So I found out that there is actually need to pull up some data on it. But there was a direct correlation when we started including clients both with an onboarding document and then actually talking them through, providing them with both examples and expectations of what the deliverables and the nature of the work is. So things like information architecture, site mapping, questions, developing wireframes and prototypes. It reduced a lot of us having to do rework and confusion with the client. So instead of coming into a meeting with just your, low fidelity, no bells and whistles wireframe, and the client asking, wait, is this our final design? And you're like, no, but if they don't know. And so this has reduced a significant amount of time and revision on our work. It also prevents us from having to do a ton of, work and design, et cetera, that will have to be revised because we did too much at the beginning. The next one is reuse when possible. I do know for a lot of our clients within these verticals, their industries, their target audiences, they're very similar. So if you have a lot of oil and gas, manufacturing clients, for example, in this area, they're both how those companies function within generating leads or who uses their websites or apps, on site. A lot of that data is something that you can recycle. You don't have to start from scratch every single time. Save yourself hours of work, do your validation, do your testing, but you don't have to start from scratch every single time. I cannot reiterate the value of using historical data when applicable. And then streamlining deliverables. One big issue I had when I really first started in UX is looking at blogs, looking at through books, through examples, going through Medium, LinkedIn, et cetera, is I wanted to create these huge, beautiful, personas. It's like, okay, how do I set up, this perfect image and then all of these persona scenarios? Or I wanted to make these, wireframes that were very high fidelity that really took up a lot of time that I didn't have. And so over time, what I've learned is that ultimately having, either a lower fidelity wireframe, and maybe a higher fidelity prototype, the bones of the website that you need were one, exactly what was just enough of what the client could understand. And it also prevented me from, I guess the word I'm looking for is over inserting myself in visual design. So since I'm not a UI designer and I do work with our design team, it was always very important for me to make sure that the strategy and the functionality that I have, in our user experience strategy does not, impede on their work, but complements it. And last but not least, resisting the urge to overcomplicate. I mean, I cannot reiterate how often I would make this work and then get frustrated because I bottlenecked or the deliverables had to be, revised, and how much time I could have saved on, revising complicated work. And part of the reason all of this is important is because I don't know if any of you follow the UX design memes, but I saw this one not too long ago, and this is kind of how I felt for a while after, a couple of years, mostly because at agency world, you kind of age in dog years. You're like, oh, I've only been doing this for a little while. And then you're like, could be 10 years, could be 5 years, don't know. All right, the next topic. And this one has been a pain point for us personally. And it's absolutely true. There's a lot of trends with UX, there's a lot of changes coming up. But UX without user research is not UX. And this point is valuable in knowing that not everything is set in concrete, but we are there for the user. And this seems obvious, but usually what I've found is that the first thing to be slashed from a UX budget is spending money on user research. And it's a little frustrating, but there's a way around that. There's a way to find either find time or budget, etc. You are better off having 5 users than none. I mean, any testing that you can do would be absolutely valuable. And what I've found to be the best option for us actually is using something with remote testing. This is actually a screen cap of when I did some remote testing for an international e-commerce website. We did tests on their original website to see where there's weaknesses, user pain points, etc., and then to translate that into an improved experience on that new e-commerce platform. I have found this to be probably with a really, really small team, you can do a pretty decent amount of research using something like user testing, ping pong, etc. It provides you both with a platform to, find users, to be able to provide, compensation if it's required for the user testing. You're able to get transcripts, access to that wider pool, and it's something that's one person can manage. You have flexibility with your calendar. This actually we were testing for people in the UK, and so I was able to find a lot of time out of traditional hours to be able to go and find the users, go through about 30 minutes worth of testing, and then go back and look for those kind of key statements that would validate the recommendations for our changes, and then be able to have those snippets for the stakeholder to see as necessary. And this is just an example. I saw this at a conference, actually, a video from Chicago, and talking about user testing. And this is from a cartoon, but it's actually kind of a hilarious example of how if you think something is super simple and super easy to do, and then you launch it, and this sort of drinking situation happens. This is why testing is the most important thing, I would say, that needs to be present in your process. Don't cut that. Collaboration. Earlier I mentioned about how when I started and took over the department, we had a very walled off process. And early in my UX journey, I really didn't understand how much of a hindrance that was. Over time, reading, research, talking to user experience designers that are a lot, with years worth of projects underneath. The one thing that I saw the best of them do is making sure that they involve development and design early on. It has saved us a tremendous amount of time and disconnect with with the projects that we've had them involved early in the meeting, either in the discovery process, either with talking through the design stages, technical requirements documents, because you can create this incredible an incredible idea of this is a perfect UX process. The testing says this. I've seen other websites do, etc. But then you go and you've sold this to the client, you've got everything written off, and then design either has a hang up or development says, with our current team, this is either impossible or too expensive. And then you have the option of either losing a ton of money on resources to try and build this, or you have to go back and rework a lot of your UX work, either through wireframing or technical requirements, etc. So once again, that collaboration has been incredibly invaluable to me. It's also made my work a little bit faster and a little bit easier to replicate moving over time, because instead of having to go and ask development or design what's feasible, what's doable, I now have this repository of knowledge, which leads me to that next one, is having a central area for everything. I don't know if a lot of you use Basecamp. I know we do. We quote unquote live and die by it. But having, your design system in, InVision or in Figma, and then having your technical requirements somewhere floating in Basecamp or in Google Drive is a very inefficient way of working. Being able to have everything in one area, from what design is doing to development to staging environment to all of the research and UX methodology, having it in one area is incredibly invaluable for your team. And it's made it possible to where I don't waste, when it adds up, hours looking for everything I need to start a project or to reference something. And then those handoff meetings. Before we added an actual technical project manager, sometimes we would do the handoff meetings, but generally it would be a kind of stick it in Basecamp, add some comments, and kind of wish them good luck. It provides like, hey, here's my wireframe, here are all of my documents, here's all these links, etc. Okay, good luck. And then you wonder, why is everything so, the final product looks so strange or doesn't function or nobody tested it, etc. What we do now is we have a meeting with all of the departments. We go through all of the documentation. If we're at the design phase, etc., if we get to dev, we all sit in there and we talk through every phase. And while it seems like it takes longer, it really doesn't if you think of the flow of the work. So as one project is maybe on development stage, a different one's on design, and so it's kind of moving along. And so having those really in-depth handoff meetings with documentation and clarity, any revisions notated, made, and then confirmed, saves, oh my gosh, yeah, tons of time to start actual taking documentation of with an Excel sheet or something. And then staying involved. Handoff meetings are not a reason to say okay, set it and forget it. Your job in UX is not done just because your portion of it is. At any point in time, it is your opportunity to go and see, okay, I see an issue that's happening here, coming back and either offering some insights or recommendations or help as needed, because at the end of the day, if something launches and doesn't function the way that it should, it's going to be up to you to go figure out where it went wrong and how you can fix it. And that's not great project or time management. And so all of these things, that we've touched on is how you can manage your current workflow now, make it better and more streamlined and more collaborative, so that you aren't having to either repeat a process or having to double back on something that easily could have been addressed moving forward. All right. And then this kind of last topic that I have is when I first started UX, I came into it after working in search marketing, working in analytics. And so for me, I had a lot of opportunity to learn about stakeholder businesses, learning about how different areas of marketing work. And it's it's been invaluable. So it's a lot of information too, but knowing the foundations of how users find things within Google's algorithm, how Google ranks, or any other platform, Google being the main example, understanding search, technical SEO, understanding how things can be set up in code to be able to be measured through clicks, etc., will provide you a better depth and understanding of the work, so that when you are building something out, you can also think ahead of how can this help our marketing team improve the work, improve their either campaigns, their marketing, etc., And that way we can measure it, because what that shows is that we have now data that we can show to a stakeholder that does tend to generate more work. There's not this gap of, well, we launched this product, marketing's off to the side doing here, oh, and there's no clickable, phone number anywhere to be seen on the landing page. It helps kind of bring everything cohesively together. So the next one's find a mentor or a community. I know both being involved with Tulsa UX and then being very active, within the international UX Slack channels, et cetera, talking to people on LinkedIn. I've found them to be incredibly receptive to providing feedback. I recently spoke to the director of UX over at GitLab through LinkedIn, just asked for a couple of recommendations. And she was very, very forthcoming and very quick to respond. That's not always the case. I've had people say no, but for the most part, they are willing to work and to communicate with you, because at the end of the day, we don't want just more people knowing or talking about UX. We want them also to be of a higher quality UX practitioner. And that's for myself included, because at this stage, it's not, a brand new designer, but also not someone who is considered, an expert in the field. And so the more knowledge, and the more, mentoring and community feedback that you can get, the better you'll be. One that I did use is UX Daily Design Challenges. That's a really good way to work on your skill set, kind of either thinking off the cuff or working on projects that you normally would not have a chance to work on. There's an option for something like Reddit. That one's a give and take. I've posted, I think, a quiz there a while back over a very sensitive subject matter. So the feedback was honest, let's just say that. But that's definitely an opportunity to post something there, and you do have the option of anonymity. And then the continuing education and experimentation. I recently started doing IDF Foundation, taking their classes, looking at their work. And honestly, there's stuff there that I thought I knew or I had an assumption of, not accurate. And it's like, oh my goodness. And so the more education that you can get, take classes, read books, go back and look over old documentation. What are some of the practices that you're doing that either might be outdated or the data says that that's no longer accurate, will really, really help hone those skills as being a UX practitioner of higher, better skill set, higher quality, being able to do work that's important and well put together in, a shorter amount of time going on. And last but not least, my last slide. So this is the resources I've provided for some of the things that I use, some of the different tools and educational groups that I follow through. Most of these are pretty well known. Some may not be, but for the most part, it's, Nielsen Norman Group, IDF, the Adaptive Path Group. That's definitely some of the recommendations there. So I can't quite hear you all, but if you'd like to ask some questions, I am available.